So that's kind of frustrating and tough. If you're again, I think the fallback is Marvel Comics 1000, right? Like that's the book that started it all for Marvel. It wasn't even Marvel, it was Timely Comics back then.
Mm-hmm.
But like to go 1000 and feature your top artists of that genre. Like how cool would that have been in the 90s if like there was a Marvel Comics 500 or I don't know however you want to do it, and you had like a McFarlane cover and a Liefeld cover and a Jim Lee cover and that would have been really cool. So I can appreciate that. But if you're just doing it just to start off a new series and you're just trying to sell a bunch of books and whatever, that's again that could be a tipping point or lead to a tipping point for the hobby, and I really hope it doesn't. But like you said, the saturation and the cash cowing
Yeah.
of the hobby is really what I remember. It's what killed it in the 90s. Like there was it X-Men? There's like a million copies out there of X-Men 1 or something, or Spider-Man 1.
Spawn one.
It's crazy.
Spawn number one. I can literally go down the street. There's a comic shop over there that I do not like because I don't like the people that work there. They are the exact opposite of what you want in a comic book store when you go in there. But they have one entire long box of nothing but Spawn number one for like $1.50.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's just
many.
one of those
Yeah.
books that got so mass produced that it's not worth really
Yeah, it's
anything
not
now.
good.
Unless you've got
Not
like
good.
15 signatures on it from everybody who ever touched the book.
Yeah, that's disappointing. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that they're, look, we're in an I also get the mentality. It's a business and we're in an era that, we might never get this kind of a height with everything again. Hopefully it does continue on because we love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But things go in waves and cycles, and so,
Right.
who knows? Who knows? But yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, if you look in the corner of your eye, you can see I'm also there's a sneaker down there. And that's another thing that's been really saturated as of Jordans
Very
became hot.
much so.
Yeah, and during COVID, and they've been pumping, Nike's been pumping those out, and Jordan Brand's been pumping those out like there's no tomorrow. And I just hope it kind of,
Because they've been remaking old ones now, haven't they?
yeah. And so we'll see what happens. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't know.
All right. So for our last segment of the evening, I figured most anticipated reads for next week. Since there is a new comic book day every week, for those of you who don't know, every Wednesday, new comic books hit comic book store shelves, unless you're lucky, DC on Tuesday. Um, so first off is something from a brand new publisher. It's a brand new title that I discovered recently that I think is really going to be interesting, and it's called Coins of Judas. And it's being released by Band of Bards Comics, and it's being written and written and drawn by Travis Gibb and Tyler Carpenter. And basically, it's going over it's obviously a fictional story, but it's going over the original betrayal of Judas betraying Jesus for the 30 pieces of silver. And in this story, that betrayal caused the first demons to appear on Earth. And so this family who has possession of these 30 pieces of silver has to go around and basically has been fighting this war against demons since that happened.
That's cool.
And it doesn't give you a whole lot of the story plot in the description of the book, but I was like, that sounds different. I haven't seen that explored, I don't think, ever in a comic book. So
I think people get afraid, right? Like I think there's always the fear of can we tackle this? And I think now that things are more open and indie labels are doing better, I think we're able to see that more often, which is good because we really shouldn't be afraid.
Well, and especially in this day and age, like I promise you, there is nothing you can make or put out or produce that someone's not going to be offended by.
Oh yeah, it's impossible.
I mean, it's literally impossible at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have a reset. Like again, we've talked about this on fandoms a lot and other platforms. I think there are things that need to happen and corrections that need to happen and movements that need to happen. But when you go to one end, you usually go too far, and so there are some things that are crazy that I won't say, but like that I've seen, whether it's at work or other things, like with people, it's crazy because I think like if you were to think about everything that's rough, like, and I'm gonna make this up completely hypothetical, because everyone's dealing with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all different. We should celebrate the differences. That's the beauty of everything. But when you think about, like, if I was to say, like, reach for the stars or whatever, is someone gonna get offended if they can't reach up, or if they're vertically, like, that's the thing where it's kind of like you're taking old sayings, and I think people, and I want to point out, I'm not just, this is a made up story, but it parallels a real life story I dealt with at work, where we were looking at a title of something, and someone said, like, this might offend people, and it was something like super super innocuous, like, give it your best, give it 100%. What if you can't give it 100%? I'm like, wait, I don't, what are you talking about now? Like, we
No,
gotta,
I get it though, for sure.
you know what I mean? And so I think, like, people do get sensitive. So I think there's nothing you can really do. So I think we're in a really big transition phase, and
Mm-hmm.
it needs to happen for the major things that are out there that are super important, that need to happen. But hopefully, there's some of the other things we're at least able to be human, and kind of, treat each
100%.
other normal. Yeah. And not be worried about saying something, if, and if you do say something that I didn't know, like, so if, I think about friends that I have that, may have a disadvantage, or, you know, um, with certain things, like whether it's hearing or seeing, I'm nearsighted. I mean, that's not, to me, that's not anything serious, but, like,
Right.
but, like, if there's something, if you can't see or you can't hear or whatever, if I do say something that does, my hope is that if I do say something that catches them off guard, that, that's something like a vestige of the past, that they'll explain it to me, I'll learn and listen
Mm-hmm.
and grow and be a better person.
Because that's the only way you can, is if somebody tells you
Yeah.
you're wrong. So
Yeah,
tell me I'm wrong, educate me, and now I know.
exactly. So, and to be clear, again, not talking about major movements that are very important that need to happen. We're
Right.
talking about little things, like, again, like I said, the hypothetical, like, we can't say reach for the stars anymore, because, it might offend somebody. And I'm like, wait,
Some
what? How
flat
does that
earther
offend?
somewhere or something, you know?
Yeah, yeah. You can't cry. Wait, can't cry over spilled milk. What if you're lactose intolerant? And it's like, whoa, stop. Like, but that's something I could see someone say. I'm not even
Right, right.
kidding. So I mean, it's like, you gotta, that needs to stop. Come on.
All
So
right. So the other one that is my second most anticipated comic next week. Funny enough, there are no Marvel or DC books on here, and that should say something, because I'm not impressed with what Marvel and DC have been doing lately.
okay.
Just their recent stuff. It's some of it's good, but a lot of it is just like meh. But again, that's my opinion. But anyway, so this next book is Star Trek: Strange New Worlds: The Illyrian Enigma #2 from IDW, and it's being written and drawn by Kristen Bear and Megan Levins, who have both worked on previous Star Trek books before, so they've got experience handling this IP already. And what's really cool about this series is that it ties directly into the television show that's going on right now. So season 1 just ended. This book takes place in season 2, or in between season 1 and 2, and then season 2 starts as soon as this comic book run ends.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So that reminds me. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, that reminds me. Remember, I'm not. You're in a delay. I'm still watching you talk as I'm like trying. No, it's funny. It reminds me of the really great. It was Charles Soule and others that wrote and did artwork. Darth Vader, and there was a bunch of series that all fit in. I mean, again, for people that don't know, Lucasfilm has a story group, and all their platforms go into, now it's canon, right? And so the Darth Vader, I loved the Darth Vader series. I love things that fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tony does too, Mr. Marvelite.
Yeah, he's a
big
lore
on.
buff for sure.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Like, we had, was it the Wakanda Files, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
had so many really cool things. I love the supporting materials. I think it's so much fun if you're a fan to kind of go in. And again, I keep saying this all night, but for those that don't know, the Darth Vader series, I mean, iconic moments that are now officially in the storylines, where where Darth found out that Luke was his son. Like that moment.
Yeah, it
in a
actually shows
comic
the
book.
scene.
Yeah, he's like, and the second he finds out, he's like, I'm gonna take over the galaxy with him. Like, we're gonna rule the galaxy.
And it doesn't show that moment in the movies, so it's really
No.
cool to see that exact
Yeah.
moment in the comics, because you're like, okay, he figured out who he was between now and then and whatever. Or you think he already always knew. No, he had no clue.
So I love that stuff. So that's really cool that it goes between. And I also love the fact that it's I think IDW has been doing really great stuff with show and movie IP. I mean, they did Back to the Future too. They've done a bunch of Back to the Future.
And they just signed an extension, I believe, with their licensing agreement with Paramount, to where they still have the Star Trek franchise for a while, because they've got it's like 5 or 6 different Star Trek books going on right now, as well as like 4 or 5 different shows that are going on right now. It's insane how much Star Trek content's coming out.
It's awesome. And the last thing I'll say, it's really cool that it's 2 women working on this as creatives. That's really cool to see.
Star Trek is one of those IPs that has always been like ahead of its time as far as diversity goes. I mean, if you think back to, I'm not as familiar with the original series with William Shatner. I haven't watched it as intently as I have the other ones. But if you go all the way back to even Next Generation with Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes and everybody else, and they had non-binary characters in that show. They had homosexual relationships in that show. Like that, that was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Well, Kirstie Alley was on there. That was one of her first shows. And then they had a female captain. She was
Captain Janeway.
Yeah, and I have not seen. I'm like you. I have not seen the movies or the original show. I respect everything they've done. I mean, I think William Shatner is one of the best. But
he's the coolest.
They've done amazing things, and for them to have back then a female captain, and she ended up being. I know this because she ended up being on Orange Is the New Black. She was the Russian cook in the jail. So like, just a really cool like stuff that you see people are saying like, oh, this is their background, and she
Well, and now it's to the point where there is in the current series Discovery, there is a black female captain who's that main character of the show. There's a gay couple on board the ship. There's a trans couple on board the ship. Like they are way by far and away ahead of most IPs out there.
Yeah. Sadly.
But they've been like that since their origin. I mean, it's always been like that. They had back in the 60s, they had people of color inside and on screen and in major roles, and that wasn't done back then.
Well, wasn't Shatner and was it Nichelle Nichols were the first biracial on-screen kiss, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, talk about
progressive.
Yeah, like wall breaking or glass.
Right.
Or, like
that was a big deal back then. That was huge.
Yeah. So it's. Yeah, that's it. They really do have a legacy of that, which is it's funny. I knew that fact clearly, but I never thought about like them continuing and that show continuing, and they've really kind of been a bastion for what a show should be and should do, and how it should push the envelope further.
Yeah, because in Deep Space Nine, the main character was Captain Sisko, who was a black male. So, I mean, they've always tried to keep it as diverse as possible, and I think it makes sense because it's supposed to be hundreds of years in the future where humanity no longer has poverty or war or even uses money. So it's like now we have time to actually better ourselves as a species rather than fight with each other all the time, because now we don't have to worry about that.
Well, hopefully.
You hope. There's exceptions to everything, but But
what's next?
That's all I've got for this week, man.
Okay. Nice.
First episode, a little over an hour, a good fair share of technical difficulties at the beginning. I think it went pretty smooth though for a first episode.
Yeah, I think it was great. Whoever watched, I appreciate the watching.
Yes, thank you very much.
I've always wanted to say this, be like, drop a like button below. Hit that subscribe button too, because it helps. I think so. One of my favorite YouTubers is it helps the algorithm oh so much. But yeah, let us know, like, comment, let us know what you want to see in the future,
What
what
guests
you
you want to
want us
see
to
us try and get
cover.
on here, what you want to
I
see us go over,
I
topics for
saw
whatever.
I saw the ODPH podcast in there, and one of our really good friends who is amazing and does a lot. So I love the advice and the comments in there, and so we really appreciate that kind of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
anything you want to say, drop in there. JJ and I and future co-hosts and supporters of JJ and the show will take notice and appreciate it.
100%. And also, I want to thank the Caption Life. I want to thank Cell Phone Wallet Keys, Mickey, and I also want to thank Mr. Marvelite, Tony, because without those three guys, this episode would not have freaking happened.
But we had a blast. That's all that matters. I had a blast. This is great. I learned a ton.